It's time for your local Farm News Week in Review here on AM 960 KLTF. This week in Farm News, Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack has named 19 members of his advisory committee on animal health that will serve through June 2017. The panel, which is supposed to represent a broad range of groups within agriculture, includes a veterinarian from the National Pork Producers Council from Minnesota, several academics and livestock producers, as well as the Director of Veterinary Policy with the Humane Society of the United States, an animal welfare group that is widely unpopular in some circles of the agriculture industry. Agricultural groups have criticized the HSUS for its tactic of engaging in lawsuits to force producers and producer groups to spend money on legal fees and for helping to create legislation perceived by some as harmful to agriculture, such as the California egg law, which increased the space allocated in cages for every egg-laying chicken in the state. HSUS's critics have also spoken up against the very name of its organization, claiming it is deceitful since the organization only gives very little money, less than 1% of its budget, to local pet shelters. In a recent release, the USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service, also known as APHIS, said the committee will provide outside perspectives on USDA strategies, policies, and programs to prevent, control, and/or eradicate animal health diseases. The USDA says that in vetting candidates for the committee, diversity objectives will be considered, geographic, point of views, and otherwise in order to achieve a balance of perspectives. Fearing a return of the avian influenza, the U.S. Department of Agriculture is moving ahead with plans to stockpile a vaccine ahead of the next outbreak. The USDA's Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service announced the release of a solicitation for proposals to supply up to 500 million doses of vaccine. While APHIS has not approved the use of vaccine to respond to highly pathogenic avian influenza to date, the agency is preparing to ensure that vaccine is available should the decision be made to use it, this according to an APHIS release, adding that it has not yet decided whether to use the vaccine. The poultry industry has been split over the idea of vaccinating birds. Producers of broiler chickens who are more dependent on exports have been concerned that the use of a vaccine will lead other countries to ban imports of U.S. products. Egg and turkey producers have been more receptive to the vaccine. They are less dependent on exports and were hard hit by the outbreak in Iowa, Minnesota, and neighboring states earlier this year. The Food and Drug Administration's plan to require reporting on animal antibiotic sales species by species is running into strong industry opposition. Drug makers now only report total sales for individual drugs. Breaking the sales data down by cattle, hogs, chickens, and turkeys would help the government track how the drugs are being used and more easily target its actions to curb the spread of antibiotic-resistant bacteria, this according to the FDA. In comments filed with the FDA, industry groups say the data would be difficult to produce, misleading, and would likely be used unfairly to target segments of the industry. They also objected to an agency proposal to allow the use of estimates when firm data is not available. The FDA proposal, released in May, is part of a broader Obama administration strategy to combat antibiotic resistance. The agency said that more actions will be proposed, while the species-specific data would provide a fuller picture of antibiotic use in livestock and poultry. More detailed information is needed about on-farm use practices to adequately understand links between usage patterns and trends in resistance, this according to the agency. The deadline for comments on the plan was Tuesday. Critics of farm use of antibiotics praised the proposal, saying it would help scientists understand how antibiotic resistance develops, a point that the Government Accountability Office made in a 2011 report. However, that same report quoted the FDA officials as raising concerns about requiring species-by-species reporting, including that companies don't necessarily know how much of the drugs are used for which animals. The FDA's latest annual report on antibiotic sales, which was issued in April, said that usage of medically important antibiotics in food animals rose 3% from 2012 through 2013. The year-over-year increase meant that sales of the drugs rose 20% from 2009 to 2013. The FDA is working with pharmaceutical makers to reduce the usage of the drugs on farm as part of a broader government-wide strategy to curb the spread of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Drug manufacturers have voluntarily agreed to phase out sales of medically important antibiotics for growth promotion in food animals. The FDA, USDA, and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention will be holding a public meeting on September 30th on possible approaches to collecting data for on-farm usage of antibiotics. The Minnesota Department of Agriculture Commissioner Dave Fredrickson asked livestock producers to apply for a portion of $2 million in grants which are available for on-farm improvements. Livestock investment grants help farmers stay competitive and reinvest in their industry. Last year, we had 120 livestock farmers receive grants to improve their operations, said Fredrickson. Examples of farmers that are using the grants include Crystal Enberg of Kenyon, who is building a new 1,200-head hog finishing barn and plans to build a second barn in the future. As a beginning farmer, this new facility eases her transition into the hog industry. John Scherber of Rogers is building a cross-ventilated barn to increase cow and human comfort, including incorporating energy-efficient lighting, ventilation, and robotic milking. The new barn will boost air and environmental quality and opens the door for the next generation to join the farm. Mark Strom of McIntosh is a fifth-generation beginning farmer and plans to build 2 new barns and a corral with a cattle handling system. New barns will allow the cows to calve healthier and under cover. Qualifying producers are reimbursed up to 10% of the first $500,000 in investment, with a minimum investment of $4,000. Qualifying expenditures include the purchase, construction, or improvement of livestock buildings or facilities. Fencing, feeding, and waste management equipment are also covered. Producers who suffer a loss due to natural disasters may also apply. The grant will not pay for livestock, land purchases, or debt refinancing. Past applicants who did not receive an award need to reapply for the 2016 program. These grants are incentives to start projects which must begin after August 1st of this year. Applications for operations with farmers transitioning into livestock, beginning farmers, and those with a positive environmental impact receive priority. Details and guidelines of the grant are available at the Minnesota Department of Agriculture's website. The application deadline is December 18th. Minnesota organic farmers and processors can apply for a rebate of up to 75% of their cost of the organic certification. The Minnesota Department of Agriculture is accepting applications for the Minnesota Organic Cost Share Program from now until October 31st. Organic certification is a third-party verification system. It assures consumers that the organic products they buy are produced in accordance with federal organic regulations. Organic operations must follow national organic standards and are monitored through a review of their records and on-site inspections at least once a year. Funds for the cost share program come from a cooperative agreement with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. Operations that received certification or had ongoing certification between October 1st of last year and September 30th of this year are eligible for reimbursement of up to 75% of certification-related expenses, with a maximum of $750 per category, which are crop, livestock, processing, handling, and wild harvest. To qualify, applicants must be certified organic by a USDA-accredited certifying agency. The MDA has already mailed application packets to all certified organic operations in the state. Any certified organic farmer or processor who did not receive a packet can obtain all the program details and necessary materials on the Minnesota Department of Agriculture's website or by calling 651-201-6012. The Interior Department has released a national seed strategy to restore wildlife landscapes, especially for land damaged by rangeland fires, as well as invasive species, severe storms, and drought. The strategy, which was developed in partnership with the Plant Conservation Alliance and the USDA, emphasizes the importance of planting appropriate seeds to help grow plant life and pollinator habitat. The Interior Department noted that in 2012, more than 2 million acres of sagebrush habitat burned in 4 western states, and in the eastern United States, Hurricane Sandy caused widespread damage to native plant habitats. The National Seed Strategy outlines coordinated research as well as improvements in seed production and restoration technology to increase the availability of genetically appropriate seed. The 12 federal agencies engaged in the development of the strategy include the U.S. Department of the Interior, which includes the Bureau of Land Management, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the U.S. Geological Survey, and the National Park Service. Also, Department of Agriculture, including the agencies of the Agricultural Research Service, National Institute of Food and Agriculture, Natural Resources Conservation Service, and the U.S. Forest Service, the Department of Transportation, including the agencies of Federal Highway Administration, the Smithsonian Institution, and the U.S. Botanic Garden. Because of this year's highly pathogenic avian influenza outbreak and the state's commitment to stopping the spread of the virus, attendees at the Minnesota State Fair won't be seeing any live bird exhibits. However, state agriculture and animal officials want to highlight the importance of the turkey and poultry industries in the state, discuss how the disease has impacted family farmers, and share the state's recovery strategy. When fairgoers visit the Minnesota Department of Agriculture exhibit in the North Hall of the Agriculture-Horticulture Building, they can speak with veterinarians and animal health officials about highly pathogenic avian influenza, hear about the safety of our food supply, and learn why there are no bird exhibits at the fair. Since the first case of the highly pathogenic avian influenza was discovered in Minnesota in March, 9 million birds were infected on 108 farms across the state. At least 60 of those farms have birds back in the barns. The Agriculture-Horticulture Building is open 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. during the fair, which runs August 27th through September 7th, which is Labor Day. And this morning I'm speaking with Jenny Haler, the 61st Princess K of the Milky Way. Jenny, we are less than 1 week away from you having to give up your crown and the title of Princess K. What's it been like the last year during your reign?
I've said this before, and I'll say it again. It has just been an absolute dream come true. My year has been filled with so many fun events, and I've learned so much from whether it was the children I was speaking to or some of the dairy farmers I got to engage with, too.
And I know I've looked at the picture from last year's coronation, and I mean, you've got that look of shock on your face. Is that something that you're hoping to be able to do next Wednesday when they crown the 62nd Princess K at the band shell at the Minnesota Fairgrounds?
I hope so, yeah. I am looking really forward to discovering who will be the next Princess K. Of course, I'm pretty sad that I have to give up my title. I absolutely love my job and everything that I do, but I also acknowledge the fact that it's somebody else's turn to experience this awesome year.
And I know it's probably one thing that you're not going to regret after the reign is over is sitting in that butter booth for 12 hours a day, the first day of the fair, getting your head carved in butter. Can you give our listeners maybe some background and some idea of what it's like to sit in that rotating booth the first day of the fair and watch your likeness take shape?
That was probably one of my favorite moments as my year as Princess K. It is the coolest thing to see at the State Fair, and it's even cooler to actually do sitting in 40 degrees. So basically you rotate around around in the butter booth for approximately 6 hours, starting at 8 a.m. and getting done around 4 p.m. with a few breaks in between, obviously. But it does take quite a while, and it's so awesome and so rewarding and honorable to be in that seat where, you know, so many other young women have sat and have been in the same shoes as you.
And I know the lady that carves the butter, she's been doing it for 40-some years. What is it like? What was it like working with her and watching her craftsmanship when it came to carving that butter head?
This year will be Linda's 44th year sculpting the butter carvings, and again, it is so humbling to be in that booth, knowing that she's done so many people that I had looked up to before my year, and it is so fun. She's such a wonderful person. She's a Minnesota native actually too, so just hearing her background and how she got started is very fascinating. She loves dairy, she loves milk, but her specialty is butter.
Right, and now I know there's one of the finalists is from Norwood Young America down by Carver County, where you're from, and also one is from Melrose up by here near Morrison County. What's it been like talking with these girls since the May event and maybe helping them get ready for the upcoming state fair?
You know, it's hard to say. I haven't had a lot of interactions since May event. They've been busy doing all of their county events as well. But they seem like such a positive group of young women, and I am really genuinely excited for each and every one of them. Your year doesn't stop once the state fair comes and goes. It kind of just leverages you for either the remaining part of your year or the year that's to come, whoever will be Princess K. So I know that they are going to do a fantastic job. They're going to blow the judges out of the water, and I'm just excited that they're all selected as finalists.
And you mentioned the county events, Jenny. I know you've been busy traveling around the state. You were up here in Morrison County in June and traveling the state. What are some of the events that you did down in your county this year as Princess K, and maybe just as a dairy princess in general?
As many of us know, it is fair season, so I spent a few days at our Carver County Fair. But Princess K truly is the state ambassador, so I actually haven't spent a lot of time in my home county. I did some library visits in Carver County, and then I attended the fair. But beyond that, it was very minimal time in my home area. There would be events where I was close and had to drive 20 or 30 minutes, and that is considered close because I've driven up to 4.5 hours to get to an event.
Right, and you mentioned being the state ambassador for Minnesota's dairy farmers. Did you do any interactions with the other state ones, like Allison Dairyland from Wisconsin, or maybe the Iowa or South Dakota dairy princesses?
Great question. Unfortunately, I didn't get to spend any time with Alice in Dairyland. However, I got to know both the Iowa and South Dakota dairy princesses very well, and they have done such a great job representing their state in the dairy industry. Just as I have, they have such a strong passion for what they're doing, and they're excited and enthused about being a princess and advocating for something that we all really love and care about. So the one event I did go to was in Sioux Falls, and I watched the South Dakota dairy princess be crowned for this year, and like I said, well deserving, and it's always exciting to watch another dairy princess take reign. It's really refreshing to know that there's other people out there in whether it's in our own state or bordering states that have the same passions and care about the same things that I do.
And then one question that always has to get asked: when you give up your crown next week, you're going to be doing stuff down at the state fair, I assume, just maybe behind the scenes more at the Dairy Goodness Bar?
Surprisingly not. So once the new Princess K is crowned, she takes over for the entire 12-day period, and then the rest of the remaining finalists will be there for 3 days, and that's in the rotation usually. I am, however, going to be at the state fair all 12 days, working the all-you-can-drink milk stand. So, once one duty is done, another one begins for me. I'm managing and coordinating all the volunteers for the milk stand. So it's really neat that the University of Minnesota Agriculture Education Club coordinates the volunteers, and then Midwest Dairy is also running the milk stand this year. So it's just really exciting to still be involved, but in a different role this time.
Well, and you mentioned the U of M as well, and I know you're a student down there. Do you expect to continue on your dairy education as you continue your studies down there?
I do still have a major in animal science and then that major in Spanish and Portuguese. Still uncertain of what I'd like to do, as a career path quite yet, but I do hope it's something where I can continue to express my background in dairy.
And one last final question, Jenny. You mentioned looking up to the previous Princess K's. What is one piece of advice you'd give some young farm girl that is maybe looking to become a dairy princess in their county, or maybe even aspiring to be Princess K of the Milky Way one day?
No goal is never too big, and don't limit yourself to dream. I'm actually working on my farewell speech today, and I have that message worked in there, and so I'm really excited to share how my year has been and a few experiences and lessons that I've taken away from being Princess K of the Milky Way. But no dream is too big. It happened to me, and I'm only 20 years old, so it's a rarity that that you fulfill one of your lifelong dreams at the age of 20. So, like I said, no dream is too big, and don't limit yourself.
Jenny Haler, the reigning Princess K of the Milky Way, even though it may be short, as she'll be giving up her crown next week at the Minnesota State Fair Bandshell. The State Fair starts Thursday, August 27th, and runs through Labor Day. And that concludes this week's local Farm News Week in Review here on AM 960 KLTF. Farm news available 24/7 at fallsradio.com. This is Farm Director Scott Colombe saying,